We unpack. We unpack. We unpack. Coming to your live boxing ego unpack. Yeah. We unpack. We unpack. We unpack. Coming to your live. Shakur Stevenson says that Gervonta Tank Davis should have fought his former opponent, Edwin De Los Santos, and your boy Ego gonna break it down. Shakur Stevenson is at it again. Shakur Stevenson has done a recent statement on a YouTube channel, Bet on Yourself, and I'm gonna go over the quotes and then give you my thoughts. Shakur Stevenson says, I do think the fight that Tank should have fought should have been Edwin De Los Santos. He goes on to say that I do respect Lamont Roach as a fighter, and I think he's going to do good in the fight. I think Lamont Roach is a great fighter. I don't think he's going to be an easy night's work for Tank. I think it's going to be a hard fight, a lot harder than people expect it to be. I think people are going to be surprised about how Lamont does in the fight. Wow. Come on, man. Ego thoughts. Let me break this down. So I'm gonna break it down like only I know how to do. This sounds fishy. This sounds sus, whatever you want to call it. This sounds peculiar. Why is Shakur Stevenson advising that Tank fight a guy that he beat? Let's break it down further. It's not just that Shakur beat him. He didn't look impressive in doing it. And Edwin De Los Santos, let's talk about him as a pro fighter and athlete. Shakur versus Edwin De Los Santos happened in November of 2023. It was like a Thursday night fight when Shakur was still with ESPN. So with that being said, he hasn't fought in over a year. We're getting ready. Make sure you guys have a happy holiday, by the way. But we're getting ready to enter a brand new year, 2025. Edwin De Los Santos, the last time he was in the ring was when he fought Shakur Stevenson in November 2023. So just off rip, that sounds very weird that Shakur is praising Lamont Roach, which we'll get to, saying he's a good fighter, saying the fight will be more difficult than most people believe, yet he's saying somehow, some way that Tank should have fought Edwin De Los Santos, who hasn't competed in over a year, who's coming directly off of a loss, who is not a champion, who has a record of 16-2. So Lamont Roach is a fighter who's been on a win streak. He has a belt and he's moving up in weight. You look at the 2023 of Edwin De Los Santos, he lost to William Foster III in January. Then he loses again in November to Shakur Stevenson. So both of his losses occurred the same year he last fought, which is 2023. So why would Shakur Stevenson be saying that Lamont Roach is a good fighter, is going to be a fight that's better than people expect? Lamont Roach's effort, he's going to put in more work than people expect, yada, yada, yada. But somehow you figured in that Tank should be fighting Edwin De Los Santos. I'll tell you why. It's to push a narrative. For starters, I really feel like Shakur Stevenson, let's be real, good fighter, skilled fighter, lacks power. When it comes to whopping, knock you out, punishing brute force, Gervonta Davis, Wilder, Arthur Beterbiev type of power, he's lacking in that department, right? So what I believe to be the case is Shakur is almost a bit insecure about his victory, and he received a lot of criticism. So he's trying to pitch this idea that Tank should be fighting a guy, again, coming off of a loss, hasn't fought, and he was injured after the Shakur Stevenson fight. Some people don't know that Edwin De Los Santos has suffered an injury. So again, he's trying to pitch this narrative because I think what it truly boils down to is Shakur Stevenson was reamed for how he fought against Edwin De Los Santos on a Thursday. So Shakur wants to use Tank as a guinea pig and almost a barometer to see how Tank does, and or, you know, probably fingers crossed, hoping that Tank Davis were to lose to Edwin De Los Santos so he could be like, hey, see, now you guys see why I ran. Hey, now you guys see why I fought the fight that I fought and made it boring. So that's what this is about to me. There's no other real reason. And I truly believe if Shakur never fought Edwin De Los Santos and received criticism for it, I truly don't believe that Shakur would be pitching this idea that instead of Lamont Roach, Tank needs to be fighting against Edwin De Los Santos. Again, in my opinion, the sole reason he is doing this is because that is his former foe. He does have a boring win over Edwin De Los Santos. So now he wants to see how Tank fares against the same man. And if Tank, you know, got hurt or lost or had any issues, then it would almost big up his win over Edwin De Los Santos in a roundabout way. That's what this is about. These are age-old media tactics and tricks. You know, I looked poor or subpar. People weren't impressed with my performance over this said opponent. So now I'm going to pit him against people that others want to see me fight or think is better than me as almost like a barometer, you know, because he spent all this time talking to and building up Lamont Roach saying he's a tough fight. Then why are you suggesting that Tank fight your leftovers? Again, a guy off a loss, a guy who lost twice in 2023, a guy who has inactivity and coming off an injury, and you think that that's the guy he should have picked over the guy he did pick, which is a current champion on a win streak, has had some activity, knows Tank from the amateurs, and they're both from the same general DMV area, and they're fighting in New York. Edwin De Los Santos, he's not from Baltimore. He's not from the DMV. Again, boxing is kind of like out of sight, out of mind. You got a fighter in Edwin De Los Santos. He's from the Dominican Republic, and a lot of people thought his last performance with Shakur was poor. So really, outside of Shakur Stevenson, who needs to see that fight and next? Especially at this particular moment, to the point where you said Tank should have picked him. And then the other thing you got to ask yourself, why is Shakur Stevenson appearing to play matchmaker for Gervonta Davis? Last time I checked, Tank was the A side. Tank is the one selling out, set Barclay records, etc. Clearly, him and his team got a good thing going, and they don't really need advice on who to fight and how to build an event. So that's another thing that's highly questionable from Shakur. You have your own fight with Floyd Schofield. Tank has a fight, but then you opine talking about who Tank should have fought as if you're like a Leonard Ellerbe in the boxing game and trying to map out Tank's career. If anything, you, Shakur Stevenson, shouldn't have signed to Eddie Hearn on a 2-fight deal with Eddie Hearn in like Turkey or whatnot to appear on DAZN, and you should have fought him. Why are you trying to pit Edwin De Los Santos on Tank? Because real talk, Edwin got more power than Shakur for sure. So it's almost like people gave you so much baggage and hell for the fight with Edwin De Los Santos. You want to see another man, you know, and how he does, hoping that he does mediocre so it will justify how you look. That's what I truly believe. You know, because people, there's this notion like, oh, Tank can't box, or Tank gives up early rounds and Tank's hittable. You know, this is what people say. Tank gets hit in the early rounds. So that's what it sounds like to me. It sounds like Shakur is banking on, you know, he's willing to roll the dice hoping that Edwin De Los Santos could preferably do something with Tank Davis, and or he has the power. So, you know, Lamont Roach, he would have to outbox Tank Davis. That's what most people believe. So it sounds like Shakur, it just sounds like a personal justification. You want him to fight who you want him to fight because people said what they said about you. It would be like Devin Haney receiving all the flack that he's gotten from the Ryan Garcia performance, and then Devin Haney telling another person at 140, you fight Ryan Garcia with no rehydration clause and let him miss weight. It's like you want the criticism that you received upon somebody else. You want that done onto someone else. But that's not how it goes, because that would be stupid. Why would, just because your team was foolish enough to let Ryan fight in there and miss weight by almost 4 pounds and not put a rehydration clause, not have a rematch clause. Don't expect the next person to do it. And same thing with Shakur. Just because you had a mediocre fight with him, now you want to see how other people fare with the same guy. Let the matchmakers do their job and make the matches, and then the fans will always get behind what they want. So to me, I think it's clear as day that Shakur Stevenson is saying this because he's shared the ring with Edwin De Los Santos. And here's another question that is highly suspicious. Shakur Stevenson is playing matchmaker with somebody who's the A-side's career, which would never work. You had opportunities to fight Tank. They reached out to you and you went another direction when you freed up from Top Rank. Another thing that's highly questionable and suspicious when it comes to Shakur Stevenson doing this is he keeps praising an inactive guy that he beat, Edwin De Los Santos. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but he keeps praising him. He's like, Edwin's a top 5, top 3 lightweight, yada, yada, yada. He's the best guy. Oh, he'll beat a lot of guys. Oh, I want to sign Edwin De Los Santos. These are the things Shakur Stevenson is saying. He's telling on himself. So he's telling on himself because he values and he knows that Edwin was a tough fight for him. So he's placing him high and saying he's a top 5 guy, and he's out here really campaigning for De Los Santos. But if you're doing all this campaigning for Edwin De Los Santos, saying how great he is and how you want to sign him and he's a top 5 lightweight, when you complained and said you were injured or sick in the first fight and people thought you had an abysmal performance versus him, then tell me why Shakur, instead of telling the next man to fight him, i.e. A-side Tank Davis, why didn't you fight him in a rematch? That's what is a better question. See, you guys get on here and allow people to feed you horse and tell you whatever narrative that they want to spin. The spin doctors is out. The resistance is out. I got the better question. The better question is, if you value Edwin De Los Santos, you think he's this, that, the third, you want to sign him, you say he has power, you say he's athletic and fast twitch, and you had to fight him cautiously, and he's a top lightweight, then you rematch him. Because the public looked at the first fight with you and said you didn't do good and he didn't do good. So if you're complaining, saying you were sick, bubble guts, you were saying you were injured, etc., then you rematch him, clean that up. If you had all these excuses for why you performed how you performed in the first fight, not pitch the fight to a whole nother fighter, especially someone who's the A-side, who has some jurisdiction in terms of dictating their career. It doesn't make sense. So again, Shakur, to me, he's telling on himself. He values Edwin De Los Santos, but he's trying to throw Edwin De Los Santos on others, hoping that they suffer so he can somehow get clout or power because he holds a win over Edwin De Los Santos. You dig? You know, and that's not how the game goes. You should be the one rematching Edwin De Los Santos because you had the controversial / boring fight with Edwin De Los Santos. So it makes more sense for you to clear it up, especially if you're saying that things held you back from actually performing your best. But instead, you don't go where Edwin De Los Santos is. You're pitching Edwin De Los Santos to fight other people. And all the while, you're telling us how good of a lightweight Edwin De Los Santos is, and he's tricky and this and that, but you're not rematching him. But you're telling Tank, who you've already admitted on wax is the A-side, you're telling him that he should get in there and fight Edwin De Los Santos instead of Lamont Roach, which you highly praised and said would give a difficult fight to Tank. None of this is making sense to me. But again, some of you guys allow people to just feed you whatever they want. I think Shakur's objective here is very clear. If you like Edwin so much, you're the one with a fight, and like a fight that you really should be cleaning up. You rematch him, you fight him and show us that you could do better. And then I think that means more, because you were about to fight Joe Cordina and you're saying how great Edwin De Los Santos is. And Shakur's also been on record saying he might give Edwin De Los Santos a rematch later on down the line. Why do we have to wait if most people, like, shout out to Jermell Charlo, right? Jermell Charlo had quote unquote controversial fight with Brian Castano. Boom, immediate rematch. The only reason it wasn't immediate in the Tony Harrison, another time that he did an immediate rematch, is because Harrison pulled out with injury, but then he fought him right after. So Jermell Charlo, when he's having controversial fights, he's cleaning it up right then and there. Deontay Wilder came off a draw with Tyson Fury and pushed for the trilogy immediately. He even had to put Fury in arbitration mediation to make that happen because Fury's trying to skip out and said he was fighting Ajit Kabiel or somebody else, right? So these are true warriors of the sport who clean up any confusion, or at least attempt to. Shakur, on the other hand, is doing something different. He's telling you how great his former opponent is, but instead of cleaning it up and clearing it up, he's fighting Floyd Schofield. To me, I think Edwin is further along in his career than Floyd Schofield. So on Riyadh season, you should be rematching Edwin De Los Santos and not telling Tank Davis what he should be doing, especially when he has an opponent booked. What part of the game is this, people? You guys let me know something. We unpacked.